Okay, so in the previous class, we were talking about the numerical modeling versus other modeling approaches, right? And the atmospheric models are of different types, different approaches to model the atmosphere. What we have been talking mostly is about the dynamical models. Okay, the dynamical models which have governing equations based upon the laws of hydrodynamics and the thermodynamics as well as the physical processes, right? And we were talking about the physical processes which are there in the atmosphere. The main physical processes that we had discussed last time are, for example, radiation, convection, cloud, microphysics, planetary boundary layer, right? The land surface processes, the gravity wave drag. I think we were discussing about the gravity wave drag last time, right? So these are the main physical processes which are supposed to be incorporated in the model. So the dynamical models are supposed to be more physically based, but there are other types of models also which we use for simulating the atmosphere, right? And we were talking that because the uh, terms of the governing equations are generally non-linear, so it's difficult to solve the models analytically, right? It's difficult to solve the models analytically, and therefore we have to solve the models using numerical techniques. Okay, but even today also there are some people who do use the simplified versions of the atmospheric models, simplified versions in which there are not much complications and the terms are linear. And so in such case, they can use the analytical methods to solve the equations, right? So the other modeling approaches are analytical models. Then there are so-called filtered models. We will talk about that later more in detail because the terms of the equations governing the atmosphere contain many types of waves. They contain many types of waves, right? For example, the solutions contain the sound waves, the gravity waves, right? We're talking in terms of the, say, filtered model. Wait a minute. Uh, Not able to start my pen. Try to start my pen. Something is wrong. Something is happening. My drawing board is not working. I don't know what is happening. Something is happening to my drawing board today. You're not able to draw or what? Anyway, we'll have to manage without that. So, something is wrong today in my drawing board. Maybe I'll restart it and it might work. I don't know. Just trying to restart my drawing board again because it is important to have the board for writing sometimes. Okay. So now it is visible. My drawing board is visible to you, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, okay, so what was I saying is that the analytical models, and then we are talking about the filtered models, right? Filtered models. I was saying that the governing equations of the atmosphere, they contain many types of waves as part of the solution of those equations that you have seen. For example, it can contain sound waves, right? It can contain gravity waves, right? It contains also solution of so-called Rossby waves. Have you heard of the Rossby waves? Yes or no? Everybody is silent. You have to talk.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yeah, all of you.
Yes,
What
sir.
about Kamsundar? Have you heard about the Rossby waves?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, very good. Yeah. So it is the Rossby waves which are very important for the large scale atmospheric circulation, right? Sound waves are not important for atmospheric circulation. But then still, the solutions of the equations contain also sound waves. Gravity waves are okay, but depends. For the large scale atmospheric circulation, gravity waves are not important. Okay, but for small scale circulations, they are important. Okay, and you understand what is the meaning when we talk about the large scale and the small scale. You understand the difference, right? In case of atmosphere, what is meant by large scale? Hmm? Someone tell me what is meant by large scale in the atmosphere. Say something. You have studied the scale analysis in your dynamical meteorology, right? Everybody is silent. Have you studied scale analysis in dynamic meteorology or not? Am I audible to all of you?
Yes.
So, have you studied the scale analysis in the dynamic meteorology?
Yes, sir.
Why only one person is speaking? Why everybody is not talking? Hmm? What about what is so? What is the large scale? Can you tell me what is meant by large scale?
Hello, sir.
Ah,
Sir, like we have scales like mesoscale, microscale, synoptic scale, global scale.
yeah. So large scale comes under which category?
Is the global scale.
Yeah. So what is the scale of the large?
Sir,
Means,
in which like sir, it is up to like the whole which affects the whole more than 1,000 kilometers.
yes, exactly, exactly. Large. When we say large scale, that means approximately 1,000 kilometer, right? And when we say
Yes, sir.
planetary scale, PLANET, then is about 10,000 kilometer, right? That is the planetary scale. So the large scale atmospheric circulations have typically the scale of 1,000 kilometer, right? And these Rossby waves are under this large scale. Okay, they have the wavelength. The wavelength of the Rossby waves are of the order of 1,000 kilometer, a few thousand kilometers sometimes, right? If you look at the whole Earth, whole globe, then you will find every day on the globe, about 4 to 5 waves, atmospheric waves circulating around. Okay, they are the Rossby waves. But the gravity waves are small scale waves, right? And they are approximately, you can say the wavelength of the gravity waves can be approximately how much? You know, they come under the, say, mesoscale, you can say, or even smaller than that, right? A few kilometers.
So I think 250 kilometers.
Yeah, a few kilometers, right? So when we are talking about the large scale atmosphere, then Rossby waves are important. But when we're talking about the mesoscale, okay, or cloud scale motions, then gravity waves are important. Generally, in the old days, our grid resolution of the model used to be hundreds of kilometers because the computers were not powerful and we were not able to solve them so easily, right? And so in that case, when we were solving the equations, then gravity waves also used to come as part of the solution. Similarly, sound waves also used to come as a part of the solutions. So those sound waves and gravity waves which were unwanted at large scale or for large scale circulation, they used to completely mask the correct solution of the equations. And so the prediction of, say, for example, large scale parameters like geopotential, the geopotential height, right? Geopotential height were not correct. And of course, you will study more in detail about this in the next semester. But you have heard about the L.F. Richardson, right? Richardson. Have you heard about the Richardson? Yes or no? L.F.
No, sir. No, sir.
No.
Sir, for the first weather prediction.
Yes, exactly. He is supposed to be the father of NWP, like father of NWP, numerical weather prediction. Okay, for the first time, he attempted to solve those dynamical equations numerically. Okay, but of course, we'll talk about his story later on. I thought you have heard about him. But his equations, I mean, his attempt, of course, he made the first attempt, but he failed. And one of the main reasons for his failure was that his equations contained unwanted waves, solution of the unwanted waves, which masked the correct solution, right? And therefore, later on, when people realized, then they started developing the filtered models. Okay, so among the filtered model category, we have got the so-called barotropic model. See, this barotropic model is the filtered model in which there is no sound wave. Okay, there is no gravity wave in this model, and this is therefore applicable to the large scale atmosphere. Okay, even the baroclinic model also generally are the large scale models in which there is slightly more realistic assumption than compared to the barotropic model. We shall discuss in detail about these things later on. Then came the primitive equation model. Well, primitive equation models were existing because Richardson's attempt was basically to solve the primitive equation model, right? And when we say primitive equation model, what does that mean? That means it contains all the equations in the primitive form that we have already studied, like at least or you have already heard, like the momentum equation, thermodynamic equations, etc. They're all the primitive equations. So the primitive equation models contain full-fledged equations governing the atmosphere, right? And then hydrostatic model, right? What is the hydrostatic condition, isn't it? Hydrostatic condition? You know about that, right? What is the hydrostatic condition?
So the pressure gradient force balances the gravitational force.
Yeah, exactly. And the hydrostatic balance is valid only for the large scale atmosphere. Okay. The hydrostatic balance, as you know, you have been knowing, that is valid only for the large scale atmosphere. That means if you are trying to solve the large scale systems like the western disturbances or even sometimes the monsoon circulation. The monsoon circulation is also considered a large scale because it occurs over thousands of kilometers spatial scale. Okay, so the hydrostatic assumption or the hydrostatic models are okay for the large scale atmosphere, but for small scale atmosphere they are not required. Okay, they are not good. Nevertheless, for understanding purpose, people do use this hydrostatic models. Okay, so for small scale circulations, like say for example, the motion in a cyclone. Okay, when there are very strong vertical velocity, very vertical, strong vertical wind. Okay, or for example, in a very severe thunderstorm, when there is a very strong vertical velocity, right? There, the hydrostatic assumption is no longer valid. Okay. For small scale systems like thunderstorms or even depression, monsoon depression, or cyclones also, the hydrostatic equations are not valid because of the very strong vertical motion. And so we have to use the non-hydrostatic model. Okay, we can't assume the hydrostatic balance in such models. Okay. Then there are icosahedral model, icosahedral atmospheric model. Basically, this is a way of representing the grid system. This is a way to represent the grid system. I'll talk about that a little bit more today. Icosahedral model, because when we discretize the model equations, okay, then we can discretize the equations in different ways. You understand what is discretization, right? I had talked about this earlier. Discretization. Yes or no? You remember? Discretization. Hmm? You remember this? What do we mean by this discretization? Hmm? Anyone? Yes or no? You have heard or not?
Yes,
No.
sir.
Yeah, you have heard it, right? So basically, by this we try to discretize the differential equation in terms of the finite model grids. Okay, finite model grids, and those grids can be either rectangular, okay, or it can be triangular, or it can be hexagonal grids. Okay, and each of these different types of grids, they have their own numerical properties. Okay, they have their own advantage or disadvantage. Okay, discretizing the domain. Okay, like this is your domain, original domain, in which you can either have grid boxes like this rectangular, okay, or you can have triangular grid, okay. And we use generally this kind of triangular grids for so-called finite volume methods or finite element methods. Okay. But there are also another type of models in which we have got hexagonal grids. Hexagonal grids also is a type of finite volume method. We shall talk a little bit more about these methods later on. Hexagonal grids, right? So when I say icosahedral model, basically they have the hexagonal grids, icosahedral atmospheric models, and they have certain different properties and their advantages for which it is used. Okay. Then we have also the so-called statistical model. Statistical model, right? And nowadays, people who work in the statistics, especially the time series analysis, in statistics, they think that if they have observations available for a very, very long time, see, then they think that they will be able to predict the future state of the atmosphere. They will be able to predict the future state of the atmosphere just based upon the observation. Say, for example, if we have data for about 100 years observations, it is a very long data, right? 100 years data I consider to be very long data, isn't it? Generally, we make the climatology based upon 30 years of data. When we have got at least 30 years of data, then we can make the climatology. 100 years is too long. And nowadays, luckily, many parts of the globe, many countries, we have got the data available for about 100 years. For example, in India, the IMD, you've heard of IMD, right? India Meteorological Department. When was it established? Can somebody say when was the IMD established? That would be talkative.
Sir, 1857.
1857. No, that was the revolution. 1857 का क्रांति हुआ था.
1875, sir.
Yeah, 1876. It was the year of establishment of IMD. So that means IMD is more than 100 years old, right? More than 150 years old. And therefore, in India, of course, we have got the data of 100 years. But does it mean that the claims which statisticians make, that if they have a long period of data, then they will be able to predict the evolution of the atmosphere? Is that true? Is that correct? Obviously, it is not correct, because if it was so, then there was no need of using this complex equation, solving this complex equation. In fact, there was no need of the IMD in that case, because data is available anyway, so just use the old data to predict the future state. So obviously, statistical models are there just for approximations, some kind of indications. I mean, different types of predictions are there in the atmosphere. For example, you know that now there are short range, right, prediction. There are medium range prediction, right, and there are long range prediction, or also called the seasonal prediction. Okay, and of course climate scale much longer. So for a long time in India also, and even today in many parts of the world, for seasonal prediction, like when we predict the monsoon rainfall or estimate what would be the rainfall during this entire monsoon season. Monsoon season, that means, say for example, from June to September, right? June to September. So what will be the total rainfall during this entire monsoon season? And that is a very important thing, that we need to forecast, especially now this month of April. Now at the end of this April, the first level forecast of the monsoon will be given by IMD, right? The first hand forecast, because the Parliament of India wants to know what would be the estimated rainfall during this entire monsoon season, June to September, so that they have to make plan accordingly, right? Whether there will be good rainfall, so that there will be good agriculture, harvesting, right? Whether we'll have enough stock of the food grains or not, right? Suppose if the monsoon rainfall is not good in the upcoming monsoon season, that means there will be drought, right? And so, the government has to make necessary arrangements for the sufficient availability of the food grains to the people of India, right? People of the country. So therefore, the government wants, the Parliament asks that what would be the estimated monsoon rainfall in the upcoming monsoon, so that accordingly they will take the necessary measures. Right? So this long-range prediction for a long time was made based upon the statistical method. Models. Because earlier, the dynamical models were not well developed, and also we didn't have good computing power. So we used to use a statistical model to correlate the rainfall with several meteorological parameters or several atmospheric parameters. And in that also, therefore, there were many types of statistical models. And people who are experts in statistics, they know, right? Like multi-regression model, multi-regression model, right? Then there are so-called power grid model. Okay, the so-called ARIMA model. And nowadays people use the so-called neural network technique. Neural network. That is even more complex, right? So there are different types of statistical models which people use. Even today also people use statistical models, especially in the neural networking. They use nowadays also, many people. But after we have got a good computing resource, okay, powerful computers, then mostly we try to use the dynamical models. That is because the dynamical models are more physically sound, okay. They have a strong scientific basis. They're not just based upon the data alone, okay. And later on, we will study that there is a limit to the predictability, right? Predictability of the atmosphere. Predictability of atmosphere. That means for how long we can accurately predict the state of the atmosphere. And there is a theoretical limit on that. You might have heard about the chaos, etc. Right? Chaos. Because the atmospheric motions, they become chaotic after some time. And we shall study a little bit more in detail about these things in the maybe next semester in the NWP course, right? Predictability of the atmosphere. And therefore, because there is a limit to the predictability, so you cannot predict the instantaneous state of the atmosphere indefinitely for a long time, right? And therefore, the statistical models are not accurate. They can predict the average state of the atmosphere. The statistical models can predict the average state of the atmosphere, but not the instantaneous state of the atmosphere, right? For example, if I want to know, or if you want to know that what will be the temperature, say today is say 5th of April, what will be the temperature on 5th of May or 5th of June 2021? Then the statistical models can't tell you accurately. All they can tell you is what will be the average state of atmosphere in the month of May or June or July, average state, and so also the rainfall. What will be the average rainfall on the month of April or May or June, July, etc. But not the instantaneous values, right? Because there is a limit to the predictability of the atmosphere. After a few days, the atmosphere becomes chaotic, and this limit depends upon the place, whether you are trying to predict the tropical atmosphere or you are trying to predict the extratropical atmosphere of the mid latitude. Right? Depends on the place. Right? So, but people do use statistical models, and there are more complex statistical models available nowadays. Then there are stochastic model. Stochastic model. Have you heard about the stochastic model?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What is stochastic?
It is something related to gradient descent, like
Yeah.
getting that accuracy, required accuracy
Yeah.
related.
Like most of the models, they are not perfect, right? And so there is an uncertainty in the solution, uncertainty in the solution of the equations. So this is like modeling the uncertainty. The uncertainty. And atmosphere is perfectly fit for that. Because there are so many uncertainties in the atmosphere. There is a lack of proper understanding of the processes, and that itself leads to so many uncertainties in the solution. So basically, in the statistical model, a stochastic model, we try to minimize those uncertainties. Okay, uncertainties. So there are stochastic model. We already talked about the neural network model, right? That is basically some sort of a statistical model because you treat the terms, the parameters like the neurons of the brain, and you try to correlate. There is a connection between each neurons. Like you say, there is a connection between each parameters of the atmosphere, right? Teleconnection. You heard about the teleconnection, right? Teleconnection. What do you mean by teleconnection? Have you heard about this teleconnection? Yes or no? It simply means, or literally, it means that if something happens in America, then it will also affect the atmosphere over India. Or if something happens over Pacific Ocean, then it will affect also the Indian Ocean, right? Teleconnection. There is a teleconnection. Okay. And basically, in this atmospheric predictability, we try to discuss about that. Like, people say that the butterfly effect. Butterfly effect. Have you heard about this butterfly effect? Yes or
Yes,
no?
sir.
Yeah, butterfly effect.
Yes, sir.
No, it
And
says that.
mental effect.
What is that?
Mental effect.
So
Sir, it says that there can be small impacts on small linear the things can be impacted on a complex system.
Right. I mean, it means literally that even if the flap of the wings of a butterfly can affect the flow, circulation of the atmosphere, butterfly effect. And we'll study later on when we talk about the predictability of the atmosphere, maybe next semester. We'll talk about the butterfly effect. Because when you plot the solutions of the model equations, then it will look like the butterfly, the wings of the butterfly. And so the name comes from there also, butterfly effect. Right? So the neural networking basically they try to connect the hundreds of atmospheric parameters, correlate with each other, and they think that since everything affects everything, and so they try to get the solution by considering the impact of everything on everything. Right? Then we also have the laboratory models. Right? People have tried to make clouds in the laboratory. People have used the cloud chambers, for example, laboratory. Cloud chamber. Have you heard about this cloud chamber? They try to generate the clouds in a lab, cloud chamber. They have also tried to generate the turbulence. Of course, now especially the fluid mechanics, in fluid mechanics people, they have the wind tunnels. Wind tunnels. Okay. And they try to generate the turbulence and then study the fluid flow characteristics in the laboratory, right? Many institutes have the wind tunnels, good wind tunnels, like IISc Bangalore, Indian Institute of Science at Bangalore, IIT Kharagpur, and many other institutes. They have the wind tunnels. IITM, IITM, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Pune, has a cloud chamber to generate the clouds. Also, people try to generate artificially in the lab the so-called tornado or very strong winds, okay, rotating winds, tornado. Also, in the laboratory, just like we have got the wind tunnels, so people have tried to represent the general circulation. Of atmosphere. In the lab. So there are laboratory models. Okay. They are the laboratory models. Right. And it does give insight, a lot of insights in the process. But we definitely cannot represent the real atmosphere, reproduce the real atmosphere in the lab, right? That you all know. Real atmosphere is much different from the laboratory model of the atmosphere, right? But just for understanding, we do use and many of the say parameters that you have heard in the cloud microphysics, for example, cloud microphysics. They are derived empirically cloud microphysics, microphysical parameters, meters. They are derived empirically based upon the laboratory experiments using the cloud chamber. Okay, They also try to generate the charges in the cloud chamber and then try to produce the lightning effect. Right? So laboratory models are important in that sense. And many turbulence, for example, the study about the turbulence. Say, for example, in the wind tunnel experiments, people try to study turbulence. Right? And you know that we have got in the atmosphere the so-called PBL, right? You have heard about the PBL, isn't it? Planetary boundary layer. The lowest 1 kilometer. 1 kilometer of the atmospheric layer is called the planetary boundary layer. Within that also I've got so many sub-layers, right? Like the surface layer. Have you heard about this surface layer? Yes or no? Everybody is silent.
Yes.
Yeah. That is the lowest 10% of the atmospheric layer, or lowest 10% of the PBL rather. Lowest 10% of the PBL is the surface layer. And so if the PBL depth is approximately 1 kilometer, then the depth of the surface layer is about 100 meters or so, right? And most of us, most of the human beings, all of the human beings, not most, all of the human beings, we all live in the surface layer only. Within the surface layer, also called the biosphere. Right? So, just like in the laboratory, people generate the turbulence artificially. In the real atmosphere, we have got turbulence because of the existence of the mountains, right? Mountains on the surface of the earth, because of the existence of the trees, okay, buildings, right? The wind flow becomes turbulent as it passes across these obstacles, whether it's a mountain or a tree or a building or whatever, right? Turbulence are generated. And these turbulent motions are very important also. When turbulence occurs in the upper atmosphere, especially in the clear air, is known as CAT. Have you heard about the CAT? Yes or no?
No.
No. CAT is the
Clear air turbulence.
correct clear air turbulence, and it generally occurs in the upper atmosphere, approximately 5 to 10 kilometer altitude, and very dangerous for the aircraft. When the aircraft is flying in the zone of a CAT, in the CAT zone, then you will find it starts bumping, right? And if the turbulence is very, very strong, then aircraft, even bigger, large aircrafts, can lose its altitude suddenly by hundreds of meters. And just imagine what will happen. It is suddenly, because there are upward, downward motion, upward motion, right? And which is invisible because it's a clear air. Air is clear. So turbulence occurs because of the wind shear in such situation. Wind shear, right? And is very dangerous for the aircrafts. Many times now, injuries have occurred to the passengers. Suppose if you are taking coffee, sitting in an aircraft which is flying, and suddenly it encounters turbulence, your coffee, your food, etc., will all just fall down. And if you are not tying the seat belt, then maybe you will be just lifted up and you will bang your head with the ceiling of the aircraft. And it has happened sometimes. right? And it's difficult because pilots can't see anything. If something is visible, like it occurs also when there is a CB cloud. In the vicinity of CB cloud, the turbulence is expected. So if a pilot looks at a matured cumulonimbus cloud, he can change the route, avoiding that matured cumulonimbus so that he doesn't encounter the turbulence. But if nothing is visible, air is clear, and suddenly if you fly through that zone, then aircraft will start bumping. And it can have quite a big area, hundreds square kilometers. Area of the cat horizontally can be hundreds of square kilometers. So till it passes that cat zone, aircraft will be bumping. And you might have heard, some of you who might have traveled by air frequently, not necessarily that all the flights will encounter the turbulence. Depends on the time, situation, right? And some of you might have heard while traveling by air that if the aircraft encounters such turbulence, immediately the pilot will announce from the cockpit that please tie up your seat belts immediately. And they also instruct the crew members inside, please stop any crew service and go back to your seat and just tie up your belt because we are passing through a turbulent zone. Have you heard of such kind of announcements? Yes or no? Maybe you have not traveled so frequently by air, so you have not heard about that. But the pilots.
Sir, in movies.
Huh? Who said?
Sir, in movies we have heard.
Oh, you have seen, huh? Okay. So, yes. So, pilots will make an announcement that please tie up your belt. All the crew members are supposed to go back to their seats, suspend all the cabin services. Immediately, we say suspend all the cabin services, go back and sit because we are passing through a turbulent zone, right? And nowadays, we are trying to develop techniques for predicting the turbulence. And nowadays, of course, in the sophisticated aircrafts, there are radars which can sense the existence of cat because they can sense the changes in the wind speed. See, turbulence can occur because of the wind shear, as I said, right? Wind shear. But the wind shear can be both horizontal and vertical, both. Right? Wind shear can be both horizontal and vertical. For example, say you have heard about the jet streams, right? Jet streams.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. In the vicinity of the jet streams are what? Very strong winds, right? Of the order of say 100 kilometers per hour. Generally, at higher levels, approximately say 200 to 300 to say 100 millibar pressure level, approximately 10 to 15 kilometers above the ground. Very strong winds, jet streams. So in the vicinity of the jet streams, you find the turbulence because there is a horizontal wind shear. Right? Suppose this is the jet stream. Both on its left side and on its right side. There is a rapid decrease of the wind. Wind speed will decrease rapidly. So you have got turbulence. Right? Cat. At very high level and which is not visible. because the air is clear. Right? It can also occur because of the change in the vertical wind speed. Right? There are strong updrafts, upward motion. There are very strong downward motion. And if the aircraft is caught into this upward, downward motion, then it will start bumping up and down. Especially very dangerous for the small aircrafts. Say Boeing 737. They're not very large, right? It can be dangerous. Or even a smaller aircraft people fly. Or flying at a short distance, or also in the mountains. In the mountains, the aircraft are just 20 seaters. If you ever fly in a mountain area, the aircrafts are just 20 seaters. And they are very small aircrafts, like a Cessna, right? So for them, very difficult. If they are caught into a CAD zone, then they are very difficult to control. But large aircrafts like Boeing, (757), 747 or 757, they are very large aircrafts. They can handle or they can sustain even this strong turbulence. Right? So that is the CAT. Okay. Okay, so we have talked about this different modeling approaches, numerical modeling versus other modeling approaches. Okay. Then about the icosahedral model I was talking about earlier. As I said, say this is the Earth, and the Earth's surface is represented by hexagonal types of grid. Okay, hexagonal grid. This is the icosahedral model grid. It is basically a finite volume numerical weather prediction model. We will be talking in detail about the finite volume method. Okay, its key features are flow following, indicating that its vertical coordinates are based on both terrain and potential temperature, isentropic sigma coordinate system. We shall talk about different vertical coordinates later on. Finite volume method is used for calculating horizontal transport. Okay, the icosahedral describes the model's most uncommon feature, that is the model uses a truncated icosahedron with 12 evenly spaced pentagons, okay, including 2 at the poles anchoring a grid of hexagons. This is the icosahedral model. Okay, we'll talk more in detail about the finite volume later in the class. All right, so for today's class, I think it's already 10:31, and so we stop today's class. You have a class at 10:30, right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we stop the class for today. I see only 9 or 8 students are there. I don't know what happened to them. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. So any question to discuss for today's class?
No, sir.
Okay, so fine. So we shall meet in the next class, and when is our next class? Because I shall be traveling this week and next week also. Tomorrow is our next class at 12:30 to 1:30, Tuesday. Right? So we shall meet tomorrow, 12:30 to 1:30. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. Then.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
See you. I'm going to stop recording. Stop recording.